Welcome to the April meeting of the Lowndes County Democratic Party. If everyone would please stand. First, for a moment of silence for all of those who have lost their lives, especially our servicemen and women in Afghanistan and Iraq and around the world, as well as the victims of war throughout the world. Thank you very much. Please remain standing, if you would, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I failed to bring a flag in Gretchen's absence, but there is here. WG, stand up front. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. You may be seated. The minutes of the March 5th meeting were on the table as you came in, so they're part of your packet. Are there any corrections to the minutes of last month's meeting? If there are no corrections, may I hear a motion to approve the minutes as distributed? Thank you, Lou, and second from Elliot. Okay, all in favor of the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Financial report, I don't see our treasurer here yet, so I'll hold off on that. In fact, he just called in. Hey, Jim. Nope. Okay. I just didn't get it. Okay. Okay, well, I'm chairing the meeting, so let me get back to the meeting. See you in a bit. Okay, Jim is on his way, so let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is our special topic of this week's meeting. We are delighted to have with us Mark Barber of the city of Valdosta. He's going to talk to us on one of the most opaque things in government, the budget process, but this is really vital. This gives us an understanding of how our taxes are raised and spent. So please, if you would, welcome Mark Barber.
Thank you very much. This is not going to be the most dynamic of topics. So fortunately for you guys, Gretchen asked me to keep it to 15 minutes, so that's really going to pay off with you guys because it's kind of hard to make the budget kind of dynamic, but I'll make this as painless 15 minutes as I possibly can. Again, my name is Mark Barber, and my official title at the city is Deputy City Manager of Administration. That covers areas such as budgeting, which we'll be discussing tonight, accounting, customer service, inspections, community development, purchasing. So it's kind of a wide array of responsibilities that I do have at the city. But tonight Gretchen asked me to talk about the budgeting process, and it's perfect timing because we are in the middle of that budgeting process right now. So first I'll talk a little bit about the process we go through, and then I've got some handouts I passed out. I'm going to do the old-fashioned way tonight and use paper instead of a PowerPoint, and we'll just follow along in that. Then you'll have that to take with you. And for the folks coming in, there's a few more up on the table here in the front. Our budget process begins, we're a fiscal year organization, which means we go from July 1st to June 30th. So about mid-year, at the beginning of December, we began to look at where we're at in that fiscal year, where we're actually at. Are our revenues coming in, what we had how we had anticipated them to come in, where our expenditure level's at. At this point in time, our budget department, we're fortunate enough to actually have a two-person budget department that they devote their full-time duties to the budget. So at this point in time, these two young ladies began looking where we're at. Then they estimate where we're going to wind up at the end of the year at June 30th, because when we get the year in and we get the actual numbers in that the auditors look at, we definitely don't want any big surprises there. And then by getting the estimates together, that helps the department heads when they are asking for their request for that next upcoming fiscal year budget. So that begins about mid-year. It's about a 6-month process. Then about February, we give this over to our department heads, and they begin looking at what they want to do for the next year. Excuse me, I'm having a little sinus issues today. And they begin looking at what they want to do and what requests they would like to make. We encourage each department head to ask for what they need to run that department efficiently. And I will tell you, from my experience with other local governments, there's a great set of department heads here, because I'm coming from local governments where the department heads would, if they wanted $2 million, they'd ask for $4 million, thinking $2 million would get cut down. We don't do that here. They ask for what they need. There's no fluff built into the budget. They ask for exactly what they need, and they do a very, very good job with their budget request. Once we get their request in, we run their numbers. Then they have a couple of days they meet with myself and the city manager. The department head comes in. They talk about any new programs they may want to start, or to keep it status quo. Honestly, with the economy like it is, the last few budgets for us have just been status quo. We just kind of using the same numbers over and over and trying to get by the best we can until the economy recovers. But it's a good time for the city manager to sit down with those department heads and kind of get a goal where the vision they're looking for in their department and those type of things. And again, that lasts a couple of days. Then past that, we take it and we begin manipulating those numbers and trying to get everything balanced, which I will tell you last year was extremely difficult, the budget process. This year is I think going to be the toughest for us to really come out with a balanced budget. But once we get those numbers together, we then have a couple days hearings with our mayor and council. This is a public hearing. Let me just say now, I invite all of y'all to come, because we rarely have anybody there at these public hearings. But it's open to the public. It's usually 2 nights, and we discuss the budget. We get into details, and we address any concerns that the mayor and council members may have. So again, I invite you to come. It's usually the end of May. We're still kind of tentative with the dates right now, but it's usually about the last week in May, because our goal is to have our budget adopted that first meeting in June, the first council meeting in June. That way, if there's something that comes up, we still have another council meeting at the end of the year before the new fiscal year rolls around, and we can make some changes and they can vote on it if need be. Now, that's just a really simplified version of the process. That's the basic process that we go through. It's pretty much paperless. In the past, if you had come into my office when we were doing the budget, you wouldn't have seen me because I was surrounded with big green bar paper everywhere. But this is virtually a paperless budget process that we go through, and it's really helped with our efficiency and the way we're returning information to the department heads, to the city manager, to mayor and council. So that's basically our budgeting process, and as I said, we're in the middle of that now. We just met with the department heads, myself and the city manager, about 2 weeks ago. So that's where we are in that process. So like I said, what I want to do today is I wanted to just kind of go by our budget and brief book. I thought y'all might appreciate this better than this, because this is what the budget will look like when we're finally, if this is this year's fiscal year budget right here. It's a couple hundred pages, so I thought y'all might appreciate this a little bit better. So I'm going to start, we're going to pass all the pretty pictures of the mayor and council and the city manager, and we're going to start where it says 2012 budget, all funds. And this is, again, the current fiscal year that we are now in. Our total budget this year was right at $78.4 million. That's all of our funds. That's citywide. And I always kind of address, because I get this question a lot about a fund. When we say, what is a fund? That's kind of something that's unique to local government accounting. The most familiar fund to you guys is probably the general fund. You hear a lot about that. That's where, we pay for police, public safety, things of that nature. But at the city, we have about 50 different funds. And what that means is that each one of those funds is a separate organization that a separate set of books have to be kept on. And to complicate that, there's different accounting rules and theories for each of those funds. So it can be a kind of a complicated matter for our accounting folks with keeping up with the different standards and principles. But this is all funds of the city, including general fund, water, sewer, sanitation, every fund we have. And if you'll turn your attention to the 10-year budget history, I like this graph here on the 10-year budget history because it shows the blue line is the operating budget, and you can see that's kind of been static over the last 10 years. We have not increased that really at all over the last few years. Now you see the red line, which is the capital budget. That's always going to be somewhat non-static, like you see it there, because, for example, we always get the SPLOS referendum passed. We're very fortunate that continues to happen because that's how we pay for our capital projects. But what happens, that first year SPLOS goes in, we have to accumulate some funds before we can start spending on these capital projects. So we may go a 12-month period without much expenditure, and then as the funds come in, then we'll begin to expend those as we accumulate it. So the capital line there, that's why you see that looking a little bit different from the operations. Next page is approved positions, and I just want to touch on this because, as with a lot of organizations, this is where the majority of our costs are at the city, our people and the benefits that go along with that. As you can see, this says that the 2012 budget has 622 positions. Now, if you went to HR and asked if we had 622 employees currently, we would not. Because what that is what we've been trying to do in a lot of the economic conditions is if someone leaves the city, retires, terminates, voluntarily leaves, if that position is such that we can combine it with someone else to save a little bit of money to the end of the fiscal year, we've been doing that. So we're probably well under 600 actual current full-time employees at the city. We had a retirement program a few years back where a lot of folks were able to opt out early, and we've hired some of those guys back part-time, so there's no benefits associated with that. It's just strictly salary, and that has really saved the city a lot of money. We go ahead and fund those positions in the budget, though, because like the next fiscal year, we don't want it to look like we've added positions. So we fund it. We may not fill it, but we go ahead and fund it. So just wanted to bring that out because, again, that's one of our biggest expenditures are people and the benefits that go along with it. That next page is property taxes, and I always like to just touch on that because I always get a lot of questions no matter what type of presentation I do about property taxes. A lot of folks that live in the city think when they pay that property tax bill, all that total tax dollars is coming to the city of Valdosta, when in fact only about 13 cents of that tax dollar is coming to the city. And you can see in the pie chart there, the majority of it goes to the city school system. Parks and Rec Authority gets 4 cents. This is always an interesting one because a lot of folks say, why am I paying Lowndes County tax? I live in the city of Valdosta. And I always have to say, well, you live in Valdosta, Hayhire Lake Park, that's Lowndes County, so you pay an incorporated tax to Lowndes County. So if you live in one of these incorporated areas, you're going to have a little bit of a higher tax bill because you're going to pay that municipality a property tax. And the next page just kind of shows our millage rate. Yes. Yes. Well, we appreciate that. We find that's the most conservative way to do it. Pay attention to those inflationary kind of fake numbers that some folks try to use. We ignore that and look at the real growth of the tax digest. So I appreciate those comments. And again, feel free. This is very informal. You got questions, stop me. That's the best way. That's the best way to do it. Next page just kind of gives you an idea of our millage rate. We're at a 4.112, 114 millage rate right now. It's been there for a couple of years now. Over the last 15, 17 years, we've consistently reduced that. When you look at the top 10 metropolitan statistical areas around the state, we have the lowest millage rate of those 10. Now, and I'm here to tell you we're proud of that, but that's not here to say that we're doing everything right and they're doing everything wrong or vice versa. That just shows you the diversity of the communities. Again, we're blessed that the SPLOS referendum passes here. Some communities don't have that, so their capital projects have to be financed through property taxes or some other means of the SPLOST. So the SPLOST tax really helps us to maintain this low property tax. And you'll see a little bit more of that when we talk about the general fund, the dollar value that millage rate raises for us. Fund balance, real quick. I always just like bringing that up because, Tim, don't listen to this. A lot of politicians think when I say we got a $9 million fund balance, they think we've got $9 million sitting in the bank somewhere waiting for them to spend, and it's untrue. The fund balance is just really the assets over the liabilities since the inception of the government or the fund began. So it's a reserve, but some of it is cash, some of it's receivables, some of it's inventories. If we had to convert to cash, that's what we could do if we absolutely got in dire straits and needed to. So it's not always cash sitting there in the bank ready to spend, Tim. Next page. Yes. Millage rate is when you do the tax digest, it comes out to be a huge number. So this is 1/1000th of a dollar, and that's how we measure it. So if you want to know like your property tax value, there's an example down at the bottom. You would just take like Valdosta's millage is 4.112. You would take whatever your property is valued at times 0.004112, and that would give you an idea of what your tax would be. So it's just a simple way so we don't have to talk in billions and mega billions of dollars. Okay, the next area is budget by fund. And again, we talked about the funds. I've told you city's got a lot. This kind of gives you an idea of some of the larger funds we deal with. We spoke of the general fund. This year it's about $31.2 million. Again, our general fund is where public safety's housed, myself, general government, engineering, right-of-way maintenance, things of that people traditionally think about when they think about a municipal government is funded through the general fund. Our special revenue funds. Special revenue funds are funds that we get that are earmarked for a certain project. The example I like to use is, if you look, is the accommodations tax fund, which is really you may know it as the hotel motel tax fund, and this is the 5% tax that we charge for folks that come into our community and stay in our lodging facilities. We raise about $1.6 million with that, and what we do with that funding, 40% automatically goes to tourism. So whatever revenue we get from the accommodations tax, 40% we give to tourism. The remaining we use, the city funds 100% of the shortfall in the conference center. That's what we do this with. The Arts Commission, we do 100% of funding with them. The remaining money then we do about $190,000 to the Arts Commission. And then we also, our half of the airport funding that us and the county do jointly, our half of that airport funding comes through our accommodations tax. So we're very fortunate that we have that's enough funding there to hit all four of those organizations. And we usually have a little bit of money left at the end of the year in this fund, and we'll accumulate a fund balance, like I was saying earlier, and we may later use that for a special project or transfer it to the general fund if it needs a little help. So just wanted to point that out. That's what special revenue funds are, usually grants, anything like that the fund comes in and we have to use it for a particular special purpose. It's a special revenue fund. Then we have capital project funds. The biggest fund here is our SPLOST funding. As you can see, we're currently in SPLOST 6, and we had about $11.4 million in this fiscal year budget for SPLOST expenditures. Then we have our enterprise areas. This is like regular business here. There's depreciation, there's retained earnings, there's all that good stuff, because those funds listed under enterprise, such as water, sewer, and sanitation, they have to raise enough in their charges for fees for services that they're self-sustaining. We do not subsidize any of these funds with any tax dollar. They have the rate structure has to be such that it supports itself. And of course, the largest one of that is the water sewer fund. Total is about $21.2 million. Then we have internal service funds. These funds are funds that, a good example is like our motor pool fund. At the city, what happens, the different departments do not own their vehicles. The motor pool owns their vehicles. They purchase the vehicles. Then each of the departments rent those vehicles back to the motor pool fund, and the rental rate's determined by things such as depreciation, maintenance throughout the month, fuel they use, that type of thing. So that's how they pay it back. So an internal service fund is just a fund that services everybody throughout the city instead of doing a third-party contract out with another garage or something like that. Our group insurance is in that category as well. Yes, sir. Right. I'm glad you brought that up because that's a very good point. On our motor pool, what we do is for standard vehicles such as police cruisers, things of that, we try to put a 5-year rotation on that because we have found in our experience it's best to go ahead and get rid of that vehicle after 5 years and get a new one because of the maintenance and things like that. On the heavier pieces of equipment, we look at turning that over every 6 to 7 years. So, especially the garbage trucks. I mean, that just wear and tear on them. It's really about 6 years. We need to be looking at some other ones. So, great comment. I'd forgotten about that. And then the graphs on the next page just kind of shows the difference of how we classify the different kind of revenues. And as you can see, the two big portions are taxes. Now, taxes are just not property taxes. It's sales taxes, property taxes, franchise fees, anything like that that's considered a tax is all in there. Then the next largest piece is charges for services, and that's your water and sewer charges, sanitation charges, things of that nature. Bottom chart just kind of gives you an idea of how we break up our expenditure categories so we can keep a handle on it. As I mentioned earlier, the personal services is the largest bit of our expenditures. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next page and touch just a little minute on the general fund. That's what most folks usually ask me about is the general fund because, you hear all kind of stories. Oh, if I put in the general fund, it's going to get lost and it's never going to get used and all that good stuff. And so I want to talk about that a little bit.